To do number 9, display the guess history using display history function. So really what we're doing here is we are displaying this guess history in this form fashion like so, in this beautiful form fashion, okay? So if we scroll down to the display history function, which is right here. Really what we're doing here is we are creating this element that we're going to replace inside this HTML component. And if we look at the HTML component, this, it's the HTML component called by the ID of history. And if we look at it, we go to the index.html, we look at it, it's simply, again, this empty component that has nothing inside that we're going to replace. And it's basically the same thing that we did for this div ID result, okay? So pretty simple on that part. Now, however, we need to obviously create this list component. And I give you a hint here. Here I showed you an example. We have a UL class list group, and just again, these classes are simply to stylize things, okay? And we have already started it out here where the let list is equal to UL class. And then we ended with the ending of an unordered list. This is UL means unordered list, okay? And within this unordered list, you need now a list items, right? Which in our case is going to be you guess this number, and so forth. And so your goal is now to use the while loop, which obviously you can do a for loop or while loop, but I'm going to say use the while loop, use the proper index, right? When I say index, that means you're going to need to use an index to go ahead and get the attributes, get the values from the guesses history and create these list items, okay? And create these 3 components, this one, and this one, and concatenate them together. So I know this might be a little bit tougher, it might require some maybe searching, but I know you can do it. Just remember this, you need to use a while loop, you need to use string concatenation, okay? And you need to save all of that to the list variable. You need to concatenate all that to the list variable. And which another thing you want to do is, and you want to loop through the guesses list and simply return the value. However, before all of that, we're going to use display history, and we need to know where to call it. So where do we call it? Hopefully you answered that. We will call it inside the main logic, okay? The main play game logic. So if we do display game, we do display history in here, we can see we save the guess history, and now I'm going to display the guess history, so it just makes perfect sense to put it in there because we already saved at this point, and so the guesses variable is already updated, okay? And so in here, when we go to display history, and if we do console log guess history, guesses, that's our variable. If we just do that and we refresh it, obviously, it's going to be the list of items that are appended, which is perfect. And now we simply use an index and then iterate through the guesses using a while loop. So go ahead and do that, try it out, okay? And then come back and then we'll do the solution. Awesome. Alright, so now let's take a look at how we do this and we properly loop through this. Remember, so we need a while loop, okay? We have this guesses that's an array. Remember, when we go ahead and we loop through an array, this is, there you go. I'm going to draw a box. And I'm going to draw a line now. Boom. And so we have a number, let's say 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, and that's an array. And there, in our case, it's a guesses array, okay? And so what we have is these arrays are referenced by a few things. Think of them as they're an address, kind of like you have a house. Let's think of it as this is a neighborhood, this is a house, this is an individual house. In order for you to reference it, you need an address, right? Well, in this case, the address for an array or for a house, in this case, is, for example, it starts out, it just goes one by one. It starts out with 0 because that's how it always starts out. 0, then it goes to 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry, it's a very bad 3 and 4, and then continues on until you have the end of the array. but you reference it through this address 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? And that's the index. So remember this index. This index, just keep that in mind. In order for us to loop through this, remember loop through this array, we need to start with a certain index. In our case, it's going to start with 0. Okay? And while, we're going to use the while loop now. And remember, while loop is continuous loop, right? While something is happening, while something is true, I want you to do something. I want you to go ahead and I want to create this list item. We're going to create this list item. So, li, remember, I need to append this to the list variable, which is this one. So we're going to do list plus equal to, so you can concatenate, remember, you can concatenate through plus equal to concatenate strings. Plus equal to, we're going to add this one first. So I'm just going to copy that. Just like that, and then add this one first, okay? Then we're going to add another component, and in this case, it's going to be you guessed. So you guessed a certain number. Add you guessed. And inside here now, we need to add you guessed the number. Now, how do we get the number? Now, you get the number, remember, through a certain address, right? So guesses, index. That's a certain index. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, how do we make this, how does this index change and so forth, right? Well, actually, before we do that, we need to end this as well with this component, which is the closing of the list element tag, which is going to be like just like this right here. Perfect. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, how does this index change and so forth? Well, in the while loop, think of this. What needs to make true, right, in order for us to loop through all the items? Remember, we're using this index to go through each. And if you think about it, if you think of this graph, we're gonna go through 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and continues on. So really what we need to do is to figure out, okay, while this index that we call the address, the accessor of the address, while this index is less than the length of the whole array, right, continue looping through it. So let's try that. So while index is less than guesses dot length, we're going to continue to loop through it. So if index is 0, okay, great. So let's say the length of the array is 4. Let's say length of the array is 3, okay? Or actually, let's say the length of the array is 2, just kind of how you have here on the right hand side. So if the index is, we can actually visually go through this. Index is 0. Is 0 less than the length of the array, which is 2? Yes. So we go on and we create the first item with the index of 0. Okay, but now what's the problem? We go back to the loop, the index is still 0. So what's going to happen is you're actually going to create an infinite loop. What we need to do now is we need to index plus equal to 1. We need to increment the index to go to the next address, okay? Remember, this index is kind of like an accessor, okay? Awesome. So we need to increment this index. Now, when it's 0, we access this one. Now the index is 1. Okay, is 1 less than the length of which is 2? It is less than that. Perfect. So now we use the index number 1. Okay, now we increment the index to number 2. Is 2 less than 2? No, it's not, and so we exit. And so now at this point, we have basically went through all the arrays, and we have created all these list items and appended them to this list component, right? This list variable, I'm sorry. And now we should actually be able to see them as we type, because we're saving them inside the history in our HTML. Okay, let's try it. So we do 4. Ooh, look at that. We got something. 4. Look at that, you guys. 10. Okay. 50. Okay. Look at that. We are now looping through an array. We're creating the list items, and we're displaying them to the user. That is awesome, guys. We pretty much have completed all the functionality that's needed. However, there's one more thing. If you look at it, you see this says 4, 10, 10. And so really, as you're adding these numbers, it's adding to the bottom, which is a little bit misleading because, as you're adding something new, you want to kind of have it be at the top. just kind of in here. So if you go here and you add a new one, it goes all the way to the top. So now you may be thinking, okay, well, how do we reverse this? Okay, well, that's pretty simple. Think of this. Now, instead of, remember before we started from 0. This time, what we're going to do is we're going to start from the top of the array, or from the end of the array, from the last house, okay? We're going to start from this last house. And then we're going to go down now. And so as a result, if you go down, if we go from the last house, remember the last house is always going to contain the last input that the user provided. Then in that case, we're going to get the last input at the top. Right? So let's try that out. Instead of now having 0, we're gonna do guesses.length, which is then the length of the whole array. However, we need to subtract 1. The reason why we're doing subtracting 1 is because, remember, in programming, you're always starting from 0. So even though this is the length of 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? The index of the last one is going to be 4, not 5, because we're always starting from 0, and so you need to subtract 1 to count for that. So if we have 5 numbers, we're going to start from the top one, which is going to be the 4, right? Because we did 5 minus 1, which is 4. And then we're going to check while this index is greater than 0. It's greater than or equal to 0, because we still want to include that 0, right? So while this index is greater than or equal to 0, then go ahead and display this. So what's going to happen is we're going to go from here to here, so we're going to go here, then we're going to go to here, then to here, then to here, and that's how we're going to traverse this array. All right? And now let's try that out. So save it. So 5. Ooh. Oh, look at that. Oh, we got ourselves an infinite loop. You see, nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Because we got ourselves an infinite loop because we forgot one thing, guys. We forgot one thing. I have to actually restart this. This is what happens when you use a while loop and you don't account for certain things. I'm gonna actually copy this. I'm gonna close this out because the browser is completely stuck in this case. So we're not gonna do this anymore. The reason why is because before, remember, we incremented the counter, right? We went from 0 to 1, so we did +1. However, now we're going down. We need to increment the counter, so we need to account for that. We need to increment the counter, and so as a result, that's the only way it will work. Otherwise, it's just gonna keep incrementing, and while index is 0, and index is always going to be greater than 0, and so that's why it creates an infinite loop consistently, basically, for the rest of eternity. So just keep that in mind, okay? So this time we're going to subtract -1, and we're going to see how this works out. So, cool. Refresh it, because you want the new code. 44, perfect. 5. Oh, 6, I'm sorry. You see? Now, the last input that you put in is going to be always at the top. 99, 16, 67, and so forth. And that's it. We've done that part. We have completed this functionality to show the guess history. We've saved all the guesses. We showed it to the user. That is awesome functionality, you guys, and we have completed it. So congrats to you. And now we can mark this as done. Awesome, guys. Let's do it.